Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is Technique Tuesday. Traveling twisted stitch patterns like the ones you see in this sweater are a subset of cable patterns. They're made up of single columns of twisted knits, knits that are worked through the back of the stitch so that they twist, and those twisted knits travel across a background of purl stitches so that a twisted knit crosses over a purl or over another twisted knit stitch. There are many two-stitch crossings in a given round, and in many cases every round is a crossing round. So using a cable needle for every one of those crossings can be really tedious. When there are only two stitches in a crossing, cabling without a cable needle becomes very efficient. Now, there are always multiple ways of getting to the same end point in knitting, and that is true of cabling without a cable needle. I'll be demonstrating my preferred method today. I find this method particularly efficient for working traveling twisted stitch patterns. So let's get started. So I made up a little chart, a little stitch pattern that I am following for my swatch, and I can actually leave a PDF down in the video description if you guys are interested in practicing these using this same stitch pattern. What we have here is a column of two twisted knit stitches, and they're crossing to the left or to the right. Every other round. Over here, the column of two twisted knits crosses to the left every other round. And then here we have traveling stitches. So we have a single knit stitch traveling across a background of purls in either direction, and then they meet each other and they cross each other, and then they cross again, and then they split up, and then they go straight for a bit. So that's the stitch pattern I'm working on, and you can see here this is what it looks like. So when I work these kinds of two-stitch cables, what I like to do is to rearrange the stitches and then work them. So in this case, I need to rearrange these so that they swap places. And I have to rearrange them in a way that this stitch on the left is crossing over the top of the stitch on the right. And then I need to also think about how are these going to be worked once they've been rearranged. Since these are both knit stitches, I can keep my yarn in the back. I'm just going to let it hang there right now so that you can focus on what it is I'm doing. So when we rearrange, we're going to use our right hand needle to grab this stitch on the left. And then we're going to let this one slide off the needle and recapture it. So we're always capturing this stitch on the left. So we need to think about whether this stitch on the left is crossing over the top of the other one or if it's crossing under. Because this is crossing to the right, this stitch is going to be on top. That means I'm going to take this needle and cross it on top of those two stitches in order to grab that. So I'm just entering as if to purl through this stitch, so it doesn't change the way it's mounted on the needle. I'm going to pinch the fabric under this needle and let it slide off. When I take it out of the one that's still on the right hand needle, now I can recapture that loose stitch like that. Now I can cross that in front and I can place it back on the needle. And I'm placing it back on the needle knowing that I'm going to be knitting it through the back. So when I place it on the needle, my right hand needle is already through the back. So now I can knit this stitch through the back, and then I can knit the next one through the back. So let me do that again. So this is crossing to the left. So this stitch over here is going to be crossing in front. This needle crosses in front to grab that stitch. I pinch, let them both slide off, and then I recapture that one. This is always easier if you have pointy needles. And because I'm going to be knitting this stitch, I'm going to put it back onto the left-hand needle in a way that makes me ready to immediately knit that stitch through the back. So I use my left hand needle, or my left hand to handle the yarn, but you could do it with your right hand. It doesn't matter. The way you are rearranging the stitches does not matter when it comes to which hand you hold the yarn in. So I'm going to knit both of these now through the back stitch of their stitches, and now that one has been completed. For this stitch, we are going to be crossing to the left. So we're going to be crossing a knit stitch over a purl stitch. So I'm going to purl until I get there. And I'm going to rearrange these stitches. So it's the left stitch that I'm going to be capturing with my right hand needle. So I need to think about, is this stitch crossing behind this one or in front? Well, it's a purl stitch. It's always going to cross behind. This knit stitch is crossing to the left. So the other thing I need to think about is, how is that stitch going to be worked after they have been rearranged? And that stitch is going to be purled. So I'm going to move my yarn to the front. I'm just moving it this way so that I'm not holding it in my fingers and confusing anybody who might be confused by the way I hold the yarn. So the knit stitch is crossing over to the left. That means this purl stitch is crossing behind. So I take my needle, I come behind, and I go through that stitch as if to purl because I want to maintain the stitch mount. I let these slide off. I've got my finger right under here to pinch it so that I don't lose it. I let them both off the needle, and then I recapture that. So you can see it's crossing in the front. And because I'm going to be purling this, when I put this back on the needle, I want it so that that is in the front, ready to be purled. And the yarn is already in the front, ready to be purled. So I can use whichever hand I normally use to purl that stitch. And then the yarn has to go to the back in order to knit this stitch through the back. Now I'm going to be purling 4 stitches, and then these 2 stitches, this knit stitch has got to cross to the right, so it's got to cross over that stitch there. So I'm going to purl those 4 stitches. And once again, I look at this stitch right here. It's a knit stitch, and it is crossing to the right. So because that's going to be the first stitch that's worked, I can leave my yarn in the back of the work. And because it's crossing over the front of that purl stitch, I bring this needle to the front to capture this. I'm pinching underneath this and letting them slide off that needle, and I'm recapturing that one that was loose. And now I'm going to bring this back on because it's going to be knit through the back. I've got my needle position through the back, and now I can knit it. And then this one is purled. And then I can purl to the next location. So for this one, these are both knit stitches. I leave my yarn behind. It's crossing to the left. So this one right here is crossing in front of the other. That means this stitch that I'm catching has to cross behind. So I bring my needle behind, insert it like this, as if to purl, so that I don't change the stitch mount. Let it off the needle, recapture it, and then when I put it back on, I've got my right hand needle through the back of that stitch, ready to be knit through the back. So I'll come back around and we can go through all of this one more time. I've come to this left purl twist that I need to do. I note 2 things. One is that the purl stitch has to cross behind the knit stitch, and also that the purl stitch will be worked first. So that means I need to bring my yarn to the front, and I bring this needle behind because that purl stitch is going to be crossing behind the knit stitch. I push my thumb on this needle to make sure that the stitch doesn't get lost when it comes off the needle. I recapture. When it comes back on the needle, I am ready to purl. And then the next stitch is knit through the back. Now I come to this stitch. This is crossing to the right. The knit is going to cross in front of that purl stitch. That means the knit is going to get worked first. And because it's a knit stitch, the yarn can stay behind. I bring this in front because, again, this is crossing in front. Capture that. I'm pinching underneath the needle and kind of against here as well to make sure that that stitch doesn't get lost. Use my pointy needle to recapture it. And then as I put this on the back on the needle, I am positioned to work through the back of the stitch. Okay, in that previous round that I did where I crossed these two, these stitches didn't need to cross. They just are worked as they are. So what I'm going to do now is work across these each as they are. I will label what they are on the screen, and I will do them slowly enough so that you can see what I'm doing. If you are new to traveling twisted stitch patterns, I'll leave some resources down below for how to find projects that use these types of stitch patterns, as well as stitch dictionaries that are either focused on traveling twisted stitch patterns or which include lots of them. I have several fingerless mint patterns that I published, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago that use these types of stitch patterns, and I'll link to those down in the description as well. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rox Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.